Hello, everybody. This is our extra segment of INN News with me, Collin Radix-Carter, and my co-host, Reef Breland. How you doing, Reef?
Hi, I'm doing
I
good.
got to intro today.
Yeah, you did.
Um, and as a special guest, we have the lovable, huggable James Fauntleroy, also known as JB Font from RBN. Welcome, JB.
Hello, everyone. So good to see you. You're lovable, huggable, you know, guy in today.
Ugh, all the
So
Let me
yeah,
stop
AKAs.
the wood. Let me stop.
Um, but yeah, thank you for coming on. This was kind of a last minute thing, but we had a, a mutual conversation, I would say, on Twitter regarding the Anti-Homosexual Act that was passed in Parliament in Uganda last week. And
Yeah.
so we both had some thoughts about it, and having lived in Uganda for a brief time in my life, I wanted to speak out on this. And so I asked you if you wouldn't mind to come on and share some of your thoughts regarding this. And also, both of us grew up in church. So, so there's a lot there in the context of religion in terms of this social justice issue, I would say. So, um, but yeah, again, thank you for joining us, JB, for this.
So,
Thanks for
first
having me.
question: why are you gay? That's one of my favorite videos on the internet. Have you seen that, JB? Where they're
Seen
at
what?
there's a video of I think it's Uganda specifically, where they're like, it's a Ugandan reporter asking another person like, why are you gay? Like, and they're like, I'm not. Like, you are gay. It's the best video. Anyway,
Yeah,
um,
I just happened to see that for the first time, I think yesterday. I think
yesterday.
another content creator played that in something else,
Uh,
um, but yeah. So
Mhm.
yeah, I wanted to play this NBC news clip that talks about it briefly, and then we will go into more of kind of the history in of terms of the anti-homosexual sentiment in Uganda and kind of its um, the beginnings regarding that. And then I actually wanted to bring something up that, in light of living there, that I'm sure a lot of people do not necessarily know, but how it relates to this whole discussion. So,
I get to
if you
use
don't
my
mind playing,
I get to use my new feature. We get to go back in time in a days before copyright. Look at that. Look at that. We went back. They can't
I
get us
assume there are
now.
sanctions or some other concrete measure being considered by the US side if this law should take effect?
Yeah, well, first of all, big if there, right? This is the Parliament passing it. It still has some process to go here. We're certainly watching this real closely, and we would have to take a look at whether or not there might be um, repercussions that we would have to take, perhaps in an economic way, should this law actually get passed and enacted. And that would be really unfortunate because so much of the economic assistance that we provide Uganda is health assistance, and largely through PEPFAR. You can see a world in which a law like this, should it be enacted, would not only, as Karine rightly said, just be devastating to a whole community of people inside Uganda, but if it were to have any kind of an effect on our economic assistance, that would only make that worse. So we'll have to take a look. No decisions. We're watching this very, very closely, and hopefully it won't pass and we won't have to do anything.
Well, nice of them to apply sanctions when those are super needed.
right? Which actually kind of goes along with what your tweet was about that perked my interest, JB. Um, so you said on Twitter, as a gay man living in the imperial core, we should not be involved in Ugandan affairs that can harm the people. The homophobic culture in Uganda is influenced by the far-right powers in the West to maintain control over it. Uganda has natural resources, this is a scapegoat. So so you haven't been to Uganda, you haven't been to Africa, but what's your take, you living from the outside, what's your take on just initial thoughts in regards to what's being proposed in Uganda right now that led you to tweet that out?
Well, you always go back to the worker, right? And a lot of people, they just focus on the social aspects, but you also got to focus on the economic aspects as well. It is discovered that Uganda has hundreds of tons of gold ore.
Mm-hmm.
The United States is an imperial nation. And so, of course, the United States wants to have influence over an African nation regarding its resources. But how do you keep hold fast of those resources? Well, you have to make sure that it is a government that is sympathetic to your capitalist interests. What are some of those interests? Well, one of the interests is to keep the human capital stock churning, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And is to keep as many workers being born as possible, which is one of the things that they try to do. So, for instance, somebody like me, they would want to force me to stay in the closet, marry a woman, and have a kid, just so those kids may end up working, in slave wages or starvation wages or in mines or something like that, just so that they can work for these imperialist companies.
Right.
On top of all that, you have this government that has facilitated these, far right ideologies, because far right ideology is helpful to these corporate dictators. Going the opposite direction to a more equal, equitable, egalitarian society means that the power leaves the hands of these corporate dictators and goes directly into the hands of the people. So because they do not want that, they're going to go into the complete opposite direction, which also means scapegoating people like myself who are in Uganda to make sure that the people stay divided. This is a division tactic, and it is fascistic as all, put out.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're using this as a tool as well to keep the people divided, to keep a foothold on Uganda and its resources, and in order to continuously have a constant, massive influx of what they like to call human capital stock, so that they can continue to have workers to exploit year over year.
Right.
Yep.
Well, keep them divided in terms of religion, I would say,
That
in this
too.
case.
I mean, it's culture stuff, regardless. Like, and
Well,
American powers get to influence regardless of what happens, because if it does happen, they're willing to apply sanctions because this administration says it's bad, So, I mean, it just feels like the West trying to maintain control over Africa as a whole, while we see many African countries deciding to stay sovereign, keep their resources themselves, and I think this is partially to that too, right? This is like anti-Westernism almost in legal form, like, supposedly. I've heard that argument from people there as well, right?
Actually, yeah. Like I wouldn't say it's that common, but I think there is definitely like an anti-West sentiment that is growing. And I think we've read over the past few months several articles regarding, like how Africans are pulling away from the West due to colonialism, capitalism, all of that, in lieu of working with powers such as China and now Russia. So that kind of leads into why Kamala Harris is traveling to Africa right now as we speak.
I
at the
thought he
time
just
of
wanted to hang out with Idris Elba. I thought that's all it was. You know?
Well, I'm sure that too. I mean, you gotta keep up the celebrity,
I
but
guess.
it's in our America's interest to kind of keep Africa's, keep our foot on Africa in terms of, as JB said perfectly, just the resources that they do have. And JB,
Yeah.
you gave away the game, because I was actually going to mention about the gold that was discovered in Uganda like several months ago. And actually, that was a story I wanted to talk about, but I didn't, but it does relate to this.
Yeah.
But I do want to talk a little bit more about the homophobia sentiment over there. So I have actually, if we go to the slide before that, it gives a little bit more specifics in terms of this bill that was passed in Ugandan parliament, I believe now last week. I will go more into that in terms of the history there.
Tonight, if you identify as gay in Uganda, it could land you in prison for the rest of your life, or even the death penalty in certain cases. The change comes after Parliament passed a new bill with widespread support to crack down on the country's LGBT community.
In our country, we will have our morals. We will protect our children. We are going to reinforce the law enforcement officers to make sure that homosexuals have no space in Uganda.
The bill still needs to be signed by the president to become law, but it would make merely identifying as gay illegal for the first time. Frank Mugisha, a gay LGBT activist living in Uganda, has grave concerns.
Because it has the death penalty, and many people will be worried. Many people would be scared.
The move is drawing ire from around the world. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights calling it a deeply troubling development.
The anti-homosexuality bill that just passed Parliament in Uganda is probably the most draconian and hideous anti-LGBTQ bill that exists anywhere in the world.
And she's not alone in that sentiment. The White House press secretary agreeing, also bringing up potential ripple effects of such a law.
We have grave concerns with the passage of the Anti-Homosexuality Act. It would impinge upon universal human rights, jeopardize progress in the fight against HIV/AIDS, deter tourism, and invest in Uganda and damage Uganda's international reputation.
Uganda is already one of more than 60 nations around the world that outlaw homosexual acts, according to the Human Rights Watch. But this bill introduces many new criminal offenses which could affect the entire population. Friends, family, and other citizens would have a duty to report individuals in same-sex relationships to the authorities.
It prohibits landlords from renting premises that are used for the purposes of homosexuality. You can be sentenced to prison for 10 years for knowingly renting a room to someone who's LGBTQ.
The law would also criminalize the promotion or normalization of homosexuality, which means any organization, including foreign ones, that has a policy of non-discrimination could face criminal charges, with individuals being subject to lengthy jail sentences.
The worst would be mass arrests of LGBTQ persons, mob violence towards the LGBTQ community. Putting LGBT persons, I don't know if they're going to be concentration camps or rehabilitation centers that are so discriminatory, because many people are going to be internally displaced.
Ali Arouzi joins us now from London. Ali, we heard in your piece the White House press secretary speaking out, but activists are calling on the United States to do more here. Is that right?
That's right, Ellison. The Ugandan LGBT community and activists want President Biden to send a clear message that this bill will not be tolerated and Uganda will become an international pariah if it's passed. They say that if he doesn't do that, that sends a message to other countries considering similar measures that a blind eye will be turned to bigotry and discrimination. Ellison?
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking.
No, thank you.
Yeah, we're good. Thoughts, gentlemen.
Oh boy. You know, stuff like this, and it annoys me because the United States has no room to talk.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Given the amount of
Neither does London either. Like,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
well, it's just, you know, Alan Turing they classically arrested homosexuals for years and years and years. Like, yeah, we got no room to talk over here in the West about what they're doing either.
Right.
You know?
We can't take care of the LGBTQ plus community here, much less trying to enforce that internationally.
Well, I mean, people don't realize, like, people will praise, you know, the March on Washington that the MLK spoke, but they won't give any thought as to the fact that Bayard Rustin was the one who helped, you know, orchestrate that March on Washington, who was a gay black man. And nobody really knew that much about him because it was, you know, looked down upon back then in the 60s.
Right.
And so, you know, the U.S. has all these anti-trans bills that are constantly going through in the States. They really, and to force detransitioning because they're trying to save the children, which is idiocy, because studies have already shown that kids who are trans, they're transit, you know, the ones who can transition, they are less likely to have bouts of depression and suicide, suicide ideation. So it's about saving those kids, but they don't want to. They want to subject them to these draconian laws, which wipes them from existence. And what's going on in Uganda, I think part of the fault falls on the West, particularly the onset of missionaries and deeply, you know, religious sects that want to influence their will sociopolitically over these nations. And because they're doing this, they're subjecting people to suffering. And even if you go the religious aspect of it, right? Let's just go to religious aspect. Why are you doing God's job for him? If he's the one supposed to be doing the judging and the punishing, why are you doing his job for him? He never told you to, right?
Yet he is without sin. Throw that first stone.
Yeah. And so now if the United States wants to condemn, which they have no leg to stand on, but even if they did, then they're just going to say, well, you guys just need to stay out of our business. Even though the United States, as well as the rest of the West, had a hand in pushing these African countries into that direction.
Well, that it goes back to that idea too of like, and I've seen it from some other cultures as well recently, where this idea of sexual liberalism coming from the West, right? Like, it's bullshit. I mean, the amount of cases of, you know, homosexuality going back eons, practically, in these places, you know, when Western influence hasn't been there, like, it's abhorrent, in my opinion, this, you know, but, yeah.
Let's get into that a little bit. Let's get into that a little bit more. So I pulled this article from GQ, of all places. This is a very long article. I'll link it in the description if you want to read it. And most of this is anecdotal stories based on this journalist. His name is Jonathan Heath. When he traveled to Uganda in 2014, I believe. So just for context, this is not the first time Uganda has tried to pass a bill like this. This is at least the second time. I'm sure it's been multiple times. But he talks about the dark side of homophobia. Despite an abhorrent anti-gay law being shelved in August 2014, the violent persecution of homosexual men in Uganda rages on. Who is to blame? American evangelists, sensationalist newspapers, or does the problem lie at the heart of the Ugandan government itself? So he continues. Amid the wrong thing.
There you go.
There we go. Amid the beauty and chaos of a country in flux, the war against what gay men in Uganda is raging ferociously. In December 2013, the Anti-Homosexuality Act, or Kill the Gays Bill, as has become known, was passed by the Parliament of Uganda. In February 2014, it was signed into law by President Museveni, the 70-year-old leader who affixed his signature to the document in a room full of international journalists and a team of Ugandan scientists who have said they found no genetic basis of homosexuality. As he did so, Museveni described homosexuality as demonstrative of the West's social imperialism and accused arrogant and careless Western groups of seeking to draw the Ugandan children into homosexuality. Although colonial laws making homosexuality illegal were introduced to Uganda in the 19th century, what this new law did was broaden the criminalization and extend the severity of the punishments. The new act meant possibly life sentences for those accused of aggravated homosexuality.
Aggravated homosexual? What even is that?
It's annoyed gay.
Yeah, it's like, you know, it's like when someone gets thrown off RuPaul's Drag Race, like, they're aggravated, you know? Like, what?
I'm aggravated and agitated right now.
Oh, God.
Having sex as an HIV positive individual or with someone considered vulnerable. The law also called for first-time offenders to be sentenced to 14 years in jail and to lay down life in jail for repeated sex between consenting adults or acts involving a minor. The law originally aimed to encourage the reporting of suspected homosexuality, making it punishable by jail if you knew someone to be gay but didn't inform the police, but this clause was removed. Aid and health care workers were affected, as related offenses include aiding and abetting homosexuality, same-sex marriage, and the promotion of homosexuality. This last clause left purposely vague to widen the catchment and the application of the law. Zoom out, thank you. Reaction to the law from Western leaders was widespread and damning, not least from the United States, one of Uganda's biggest aid donors. This is a tragic day for Uganda and for all who care about the cause of human rights, said Secretary of State John Kerry. He went on to say that the law would have an adverse effect on public health initiatives, including those related to HIV. The law is not just morally wrong, he added. It complicates a valued relationship. We are beginning an internal review of our relationship with the government of Uganda. Bullshit. Anyway.
Yeah, this was in 2014. This is 2014.
Yep. Then, last August, a brief reprieve. Facing millions of dollars in lost aid from the US, and just days before the very first US Africa Leaders Summit was due to take place in Washington, D.C., which we reported on here,
Yeah.
the AHA was repealed, with a judge annulling the law over a technicality that found there to be too few politicians in Parliament when the act was passed. There was no quorum, thus the judge concluded that the act was passed illegally. Although undoubtedly a positive step, the annulment has had little effect on the legality of homosexuality in Uganda. The act was thrown out only over a constitutional technicality, rather for its severe content. Many believed it will be reinstated,
Which it has
perhaps
been.
even, which it is, perhaps with even harsher potential punishments this time around.
Like the death penalty.
Right. According to the 2007 Pew Global Attitudes Project, 96% of Ugandan residents believe that homosexuality is a way of life that society should not accept, the fifth highest rate of non-acceptance in the 45 countries surveyed. Before the global outrage at Uganda's human rights violations, however, the idea of homosexuality was something that wasn't discussed in public, nor in the local press. Quite simply, it was an issue you could say was hidden in plain sight. Uganda is religiously diverse, with Christianity and Islam being the most widely practiced faiths. One of the largest religious buildings here is a mosque, a gift from the late Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi to the Muslims of Uganda, finished in 2006. Its size, that of 6 football pitches, is indicative of the significance of the religion in the culture. Everywhere in Kampala, that's the capital, new larger churches are being constructed, towering over the sprawling slums like divine beacons. Along with a belief system and moral code that some say is only just shy of fanaticism, the pervading culture within the country is one that is fervently conservative. That's very true. There is a feeling that every vice is hidden below the surface, whether that be sex or alcoholism. Alcohol abuse is a growing problem in Uganda, gripping rural areas where local moonshine or wagari, or war gin, is made from rotten boiled bananas and stored in vast jerry cans. The homemade batches can be strong enough to blind a man. Can you zoom out, please, Reef? Thank you.
Yeah.
Religion is a powerful weapon in the war against homosexuals in Uganda, and in recent years, spurred on by zealous American missionaries such as Scott Lively and Lou Engle, Uganda has become a fertile ground in which to plant seeds of bigoted fundamentalism. As the US becomes increasingly resistant to such extreme Christian-led doctrine, Africa, and especially Uganda, where almost 50% of the population is under 15 years old, impressionable and poor, has become a battleground, one where religious leaders are free to bring miseducation and persecution through the fear of God.
The fear of God.
It was Scott Lively, a 56-year-old from Massachusetts, who visited Uganda in March 2009 and forged strong bonds with politicians and religious leaders. Lively was allowed to fan anti-homosexual sentiment by giving lengthy presentations to members of the Ugandan parliament and the cabinet, instilling and compounding a notion that Western agitators were looking to destroy Uganda's social fabric by spreading the disease of homosexuality through the recruitment of children. He called this the gay agenda.
Where have we heard that one before? JB, what is on the gay agenda? I know you go to the meetings, you know, like what's on the calendar, you know?
Let me check. The calendar for right now is healthcare, housing. Yeah, I'm looking at ketamine. No kids on the list though.
No
I don't
kids on the list,
I don't see them on the list though.
No. Lady Gaga concert, you know.
No, I see flying kites.
Nice.
Yeah, that's all the agenda. We love our rainbow kites.
Dude.
And yeah, so as far as the gay agenda is really just to us to live a life of acceptance and be free to live how we naturally are. That's really all it is.
So awful. We got to keep it from our kids. Got to keep that away from them.
And I think it's very significant.
You know what's funny about that?
So many things.
Well, you know what? I probably would have been jailed when I was 8
Yeah.
because that's how early I knew when I was gay.
Mm.
Oh, but they'll say, "Oh, but you learned it from somebody." No, no. I knew I was gay when I watched Aladdin kiss Jasmine. That was two straight people kissing each other, and I wanted to be where Jasmine was. So
He's got a cool
let's get this.
tiger, you know?
The ultimate thing is people automatically think it's a choice. They think you choose to be gay. If that was the case, then many of us would have already chosen to be straight, and it'd be even more rare to be gay. But it's not. Why? Because we don't choose it. Because this is just who we are. And we have existed for eons of time. Some gay people are your mama and your daddy. Some gay people are your auntie and your grandpa. Some gay people are your brother, your sister. Some gay people are your teachers. Some gay people are people who are fighting for your country. The thing is that we have always existed and we will always will exist. A lot of y'all kids are gay, but you guys don't even know it yet. Some of y'all are going to have gay children who you haven't had kids yet. And guess what? We're always going to exist. We've always been here. Trans people are going to exist. Bi people are going to exist. Gay people are going to exist. Even non-binary people are always going to exist. So you're going to condemn them to death too? And the question is, who are they hurting? Because they'll use the guise of hurting the children. But no, all you got to do is look at straight clergymen and boom, there you go.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Or ask a lot of women who touched them.
Yeah.
An uncle. It was a father. It was a male cousin. Oh, but we're not going to talk about that, right? We're not going to talk about how, a lot of women have been assaulted when they were little girls by straight men. And nobody wants to talk about that?
Right.
Really?
Right.
There was a series done by Stephen Fry where he talked about anti-gay things in multiple places. And when he was in Africa, he talked to a lesbian woman who had been raped by men to cure her lesbianism, right? Got pregnant and got AIDS. Like it's devastating, the hypocrisy that is here, you know?
Right. I think it's interesting that this issue is being used it is weaponizing Africans because it makes them look like the heathens in this, in them being like, oh, look at this country, look at this backwards country where, they can't even accept gay people. When the reality is, as the journalist mentioned in this article, this is a lot stemming from
a Massachusetts guy, Scott Lively.
I would argue even before that, honestly.
Yeah,
I would argue
for sure.
way before. I would argue way before. And like I said, I've been there. And I was a part of the missionary group, there when I was there. But there have been missionaries that have been going to Uganda for decades prior to this. If they did more research, they would know that. But this sentiment has been there since colonialism in the country, since the 19th century. So it's just a matter of, the problem is, again, in Africa, it's isolated in terms of ideas, in terms of thought. Like I always say, in Africa, especially in the bush, it's like they do things 5 to 10 years behind everybody else. Because internet is not readily available. TV, not everyone has a TV. Especially if you're poor, you're not going to have a TV.
So no,
you may be lucky if you have a radio in your house. You may be lucky if you're able to afford a newspaper. So a lot of the information that we kind of take it for granted from our phones, a lot of poor Africans do not necessarily have access to. The only thing that they might have in terms of getting information frequently is the church. So they'll walk miles down the dirt path to go to church, and that's where they're getting a lot of these ideas from, you know? So the church has weaponized, and I say this in terms, and I could say this, like in terms of white missionaries, because Black missionaries ain't going over there, because I was one of the few that were there, and that was within the last decade, you know? White missionaries who are going in and bringing these ideas in. And again, these are generally young, impressionable teens, because the median age, as in the article, it's 15. So it's a very young continent, very impressionable, and they're using fear to capture these children, and they grow up to be adults with these same mindsets. And you could see the result of this in terms of their government and how they're pushing these fundamentalistic ideas along. But I say all that, and this is what I said to JB. That being said, in light of all of this, it's strange that two straight men are able to hold hands in a country to signify a close relationship, and that's not interpreted as gay. It's a rare occurrence. I would actually argue not rare, it's very common. And it happened to me once when I was living there, but it does happen. What do I mean by that? So,
yeah. There you go.
So, found this on Twitter. Now, granted, this is a picture of a white man and a Black man in Uganda. But if you scroll down, Reef, from me, they're holding hands. And you will see this pretty frequently in Uganda. You will see two straight men holding hands down the road like that, and that's not interpreted as gay. So I actually found this blog, and it was written by, oh God, I forgot her name. I'll find it at the end. But this is a woman who wrote, I believe lives in South Africa now, but she's Ugandan. And it's common to see men in Uganda, in Africa, and I'll actually argue in the Middle East as well, holding hands. So she writes, a friend visiting my hometown recently was quite shocked at the male-on-male affection he had received and witnessed since being in Uganda. As a heterosexual and somewhat macho male, he was uncomfortable with the hand-holding attempts made towards him by his Ugandan male hosts, coupled with the fact that he was completely caught off guard, so he pegged Uganda as an ultra-masculine country as a result of all the anti-gay media reports. While the affection he was referring to has nothing to do with homosexuality or masculinity, it did make sense to me that an African-American 30-year-old male from New York would feel confused by a guy trying to hold his hand. I suppose I overlooked bringing this cultural custom in my tourist guidelines to him, but I could see that it's noteworthy to mention, most especially to those with a more Western approach to same-gender PDA. As a woman, observing male behavior from mannerisms to ego makes for interesting viewing, just as men enjoying peering, prowling, and poking fun at our occasional feline cattiness and the mysticism surrounding us going to the bathroom in pairs. When you walk on Kampala streets, it isn't uncommon to see two male friends walking hand in hand, peacefully and jubilantly swinging their hands in the basking sun, or grown men greeting each other with a handshake that lingers into a hand interlock that lasts for a substantial part of the conversation. That is definitely true. Like, I can't do it, okay, because it's just me, but there is
involved.
No, but there is like a certain way you shake a Ugandan's hand. It's not involved, but it can take a while. Like, but the idea is like, they want to engage you in terms of closeness / affection. So, which is not interpreted as gay, but it's like the idea of like, you can stop on a dirt road and somebody, and like here, generally, like, we don't talk to anybody, you know, on the street or whatever, even if we know them, or it might be just passing along. Ugandans generally stop and you are expected to talk to them. Even if you're going to be late somewhere, you are expected to talk and engage that person in conversation. You know, that is a little more like, not just passing through, but a little more intimate, you know,
Gotcha.
like, because socially, like, that's just part of the way they do things over there. But anyway, where did I stop? Yeah, it is a very effortless and comfortable display of friendship, respect, and affection. When I was younger, I was embarrassed by my male family members holding hands with other males when greeting, most especially when they would do so with men of a different race, culture, and background who were obviously uncomfortable and trying to level best to free themselves from the situation. Western culture regards adult hand-holding as effeminate, romantic, something that generally takes place between a man and a woman, and a romantic involved couple, not between two heterosexual, non-feminine, virile African men. Once one gets rid of these preconceived and often fear-induced interpretations, it becomes obvious that these displays of affection are actually actions of good nature, solidarity, and hospitality, not romantic fondness. In the debate with said African-American friend, I debated the affections he received from Ugandan males as no different to his regular greetings with his American friends. The only difference is that their actions have been adjusted and have been conformed to fears and preconceptions of straight versus gay behavior. I argue that their masculinity is increasingly being defined by rules and definitions of appropriate male behavior in fear of seeming gay and ultimately fear of being gay, especially among Black males. Same-sex affection is a normal part of life. Our children do it naturally until they too become molded by acceptable behavior, stereotypes, and fear. I guess it's an African thing, he said. I came across some 19th century photography that proved my point. At the time, it was quite common for men to go to a studio with their best friends and pose in seemingly affectionate and loving poses. They held hands, sat on each other's laps, intertwined their hands and legs. I rest my case.
Like gangsters.
This was before homosexuality was termed such, so perhaps the boundaries for homosexual behavior were narrow and prejudiced. Men could hold hands because they liked each other, because they felt like it, because it wasn't wrong to do so. This is all quite similar to 21st century Africa, where we aren't yet as hung up with creating boundaries between heterosexual and homosexual behavior, although perhaps we are at the early stages of doing so. When my African-American friend's favorite basketball team celebrates a win or do whatever that they do that drives them into chest pumping, ass slapping, hugging situation, that behavior isn't equivocal to homosexuality because it has been deemed appropriate by the powers that be, because it's sports, adrenaline, basketball players, or any other reason one could concoct, then it is acceptable? I guess so. So to prove our point, check this out.
Like I said, like gangsters, straight up. Like,
right.
You know.
Yeah.
So,
and you didn't think this, and just as an extra,
nice.
It happened among Black African-American men too. So, so there was a part in our history where this was accepted among straight men. So the question is, what happened that this is no longer deemed acceptable? But anyway, my friend felt assured, and I suppose relieved, that people weren't making constant passes at him, but he wasn't sure if he could return the love, and I get that. I don't, but we can respect the cultural practices of others without having to conform to them. One needn't feel forced to kiss another man on the cheeks because he is in Rome, or walk the streets hand in hand with their buddy in Uganda, but, as I said to my friend, if he does, he'll still be a real man afterwards. I promise.
I'm a
So yeah, I wanted to counter with this, because that's what I saw frequently. Well, not frequently, at least with me. Like, I had a mentee who was at the time, I think he was around 16 at the time, and I was in like my 30s. He held my hand like walking down the road. Like he initiated, not me. But like that was one of the first things that when I lived in Uganda was shared with me, that do not be surprised if there are men who will be willing to hold your hand. That's actually a good thing, because that shows that they accept you, you know, and they trust you and they have affection for you. Doesn't mean that they're gay, you know. And as I said, I've been to Morocco and Jordan, similar practice. You know, and they have a very anti-gay sentiment, especially with Islam in those countries. But you will also see men who are straight walking, hand holding, you know, also very common. And I would argue in Asia as well, same practice. So
JB, we're gonna
it
have to sneak
sucks.
into Colin's luggage. You know,
Why?
just to go on all these trips with you, like, you know.
But you know what? I think I wanted to share that because most people don't know that.
Yeah, it's a
Most
cultural
people,
difference.
there's a huge cultural difference, but I think, again, as I said, the idea that I think the West is using this to weaponize Africa in terms of how backwards they are, when I think in a lot of ways, they're a lot more progressive in certain areas, especially in this, that I think needs to be highlighted. So that's why I made that comment to JB. It's like, this is what happens over there. Not many people would know that Uganda and then in other African countries, it's okay for straight men to hold each other's hand, you know? So to kind of counter with that, with this anti-gay sentiment, I think has to be looked into a lot more. But the idea of Uganda being anti-gay, I would argue, as we've said, it's more in line with colonialism / the fundamentalistic religions aspect of our country, which I would argue, as I said in the tweet, which I didn't show, extremely outdated, and oppressive, that there is that sentiment. And unfortunately, because there is a lack of media and a lack of, you know, not many people are going to Africa, you know. Typically, people who are going there at any given rate would be white missionaries who are taking teams with them to promote the gospel, quote unquote. And these are the vehicles that they use, especially in the bush, to, and I won't say all of them, because I worked with one that I felt was fairly decent in certain ways, and in other ways not, in hindsight. But they use that fear of God to perpetuate a lot of these Africans who do not have that access, who do not have other people coming in to talk to them about other ways of living, that's what they're exposed to. And that's the fear and the retribution that they carry, you know, with them. That you see the results of this. And then we kind of point fingers at them, basically being like, you're backwards in thinking this way.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I just felt it was important to kind of share this other aspect of Ugandan culture, which, as I said, most people will not know about. And I think it's interesting that I think in this article, this blog that this lady mentioned, you know, I think especially among Black men, you know, I think is very important, because Black men are known stereotypically not to be affectionate. We're known to be hard. We're known to be, you know, stoic and like, which, you know, I feel that's an aspect, again, you know, due to fear and due to the oppression that we kind of live under, living in this country, that we are subjugated to. And so I think the idea of us being more willing to open up emotionally. But I think more importantly, being able to be more exposed to how other countries live, especially how other Black men live outside of the Western Hemisphere, I think is also very important to kind of understand their different ways of living. And as she said, I kind of had a problem with this guy basically being like, nah, I can't do that. Why not? You know, like, are you that macho? Are you that into yourself? Are you that fearful to hold another guy's hand? Like, what's the issue? Like, if you're not gay, that's not an issue for you. Obviously, as it's shown, you know, these men, the Ugandan men, aren't gay either. So, you know, I just don't understand the sentiment that this guy had in terms of not being willing to fully go and immerse and accept a cultural difference that was uniquely foreign to him.
Anything to add, JP?
Social conditioning, that's what it is.
Yeah.
That he was conditioned to think and be uncomfortable in that way. That's what it was. And so that's what a lot of Black men, especially Black American men, are conditioned to think, oh, well, we can't, you know, be affectionate, or I can't say I love you. My boy, he knows I love him, but I can't just say that outwardly. You know what I mean? That's basically the way it is. And because there's always this fear of looking like you're gay, because they feel that anything other than straight is bad. I'm going to piss some people off. Being gay is actually natural. Trans is natural. Being straight is natural. The thing is that people are on a spectrum. People are not a monolith. So many of us are varying different degrees and different ways. And the thing is that's how we were built.
Right.
And the thing is that some people are told to not like other people. This is equal to not liking people who are brunettes.
Yep. I mean, or at least
What do
gingers.
you have against brunettes? Is being brunette any type of threat to you in your life? No. So why are you, against people like myself?
Yeah.
So that's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, we got Nick here.
We have, so we have a little bit more. Some of your colleague, Nick, responded to this. I think before or after we talked, he said, Ugandan anti-homosexuality bill is atrocious, but so is cultural imperialism. Liberals are the worst with this nonsense. And then
I'll go to it.
And then moving, and if you want to go back down,
there's Haifong.
Danny Haifong responded, anything to stop African countries from dealing with Russia and China, waiting for sanctions on the Gulf monarchs. And then the next tweet, there we go, from Emergency Pants, he or she says, I don't know what ulterior motive we have here, what resources we want from Uganda, but there definitely is something. We don't act against any country over human rights. We don't give a single fuck about human rights. That's always a cover. Well, guess what, JV? Because per usual, you gave away the game.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. Because if we're smart, and we assume our audience is very smart, they would think that, what do we want that they'll make this much noise? And you said it earlier. This is probably a reason why. As I said, I sat on this story because this was discovered, I believe, in the fall. I think I told you about this, Reef, but I didn't report on it. Makes it, might as well talk about it now. So play that clip, please.
In Namaingo, eastern Uganda, artisanal miners carry out the painstaking task of extracting gold. it's an industry that could be about to boom. After government exploration surveys indicate there could be huge deposits in the country.
We've got a lot of gold. 320 million tons of gold confirmed, worth 12-point-something trillion dollars.
Uganda's president wants most of this mineral resource to be refined locally in a bid to boost the nation's economy.
It is criminal for anybody to continue arguing for the continued export of raw materials in Africa when there is 90% more value in that product that you are giving to the outsiders.
Gold tops the list of Uganda's most lucrative exports, followed by coffee. Figures from the country's energy ministry show that in 2019 and 2020, Uganda exported gold worth over $3 billion to Hong Kong, the United Arab Emirates, and South Korea. If estimates are correct, mineral...
You hear that?
Mm-hmm.
How much they exported
Yep.
to the West's alleged enemies?
Which was, what was it, how much?
Arab Emirates and South Korea. $1 billion to Hong Kong, the United Arab Emirates, and South
So the
Korea.
UAE, South
If
Korea,
estimates
million,
are correct, mineral
billion,
development experts say
billion.
this latest gold discovery could be worth more in revenues than the oil fields in the west of the country. With
More
6.5
than the
billion
oil.
barrels of oil available to be tapped, many expected fossil fuel to be a key driver of Uganda's economy. Now experts believe a gold rush could bring big benefits.
If that indeed is the volume that we have, it's time to clean our house and say, let us do business, let us develop our country, let us develop ourselves, and go to the middle income status and beyond.
Those earrings are legit.
Refining gold locally could enhance job creation and improve social service delivery for those living near to where the mineral is extracted. But for now, the government is hoping the discovery of this precious metal makes Uganda an attractive prospect for investors. Hilary Yesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, we'll
Yeah.
be there for gold and oil. Good to know.
Right. Right. So, yeah. So I said this back then. I said this to Reef. Museveni should have kept his mouth shut.
Mm-hmm.
He should not have announced. Like when I heard that saw the paper, I'm like, shit.
We ain't found
You know,
shit, was what he should have said. You know?
Right. Right. You know, he should have kept his mouth shut. He should have not revealed this amount of gold that has been discovered in the country that now we potentially will want, and now we'll do anything in order to try and get it. And especially now since they're already dealing with this gold in Uganda, in China and the UAE and Korea, you know, that's all the US is going to want some of that action too. So I know Kamala is not going to visit Uganda, but I'm sure a lot of her visit is related to all of this.
Yeah.
In terms of, you know, I know she's going to be in Tanzania, which is right next door. So, yeah. So it's like, okay, you know, they have oil and gold, you know. So I don't find it surprising that I personally think this anti-homosexuality bill is more or less a red herring in a sense, as a means for the US to, you know, get attention in light of this, and make us think about this, and possibly wanting to intervene, you know, which could mean possible sanctions, as Danny said. But Museveni is corrupt as fuck, so he will basically do anything. And I apologize to my Ugandan family. You know, I love you, but I've said this on the record. I'm not a fan of your president. Now, I'll just say that off the cuff, you know. But then again, I'm not a fan of any politician anywhere. So, regardless. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think this is just a way for us to kind of intervene in Uganda in the name of quote unquote democracy,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can take their resources. So
Closing
that's
statements, JB? You got anything?
We have to keep in mind that whenever they try to vilify or otherize a disenfranchised group, it is because they're trying to keep the working people divided in order to exploit us.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just here. And this is what, and this is kind of my message and part of the reason why I was encouraged to be a part of this space is stuff like this. Because I think especially among Black people, because Black people can see, you know, like this anti-gay sentiment, and they be like, oh, we're so much better, we're so much farther along than these
Yeah, well,
Africans.
me and JB, both as Floridians, know better. You know?
Right.
Like, we got to deal with insanist right there in
Right.
Tallahassee, so, you know.
But when you deal with class,
Yep.
doesn't matter where on the globe you are, especially if you're Black.
Mm-hmm.
If you're poor and Black, you're poor and Black. Doesn't matter if you're in the US, Caribbean, Europe, anywhere. Like, they're not going to give a shit about you.
Yep.
And even with all this gold that, you know, has been discovered, who is it going to benefit? It's not going to benefit the people who are working it. It's going to benefit Museveni, and probably by association, you know, like,
Unlike,
all these
how
other
many
countries.
wealthy gay Ugandans do you think will be completely safe from anything that comes, you know, down this pipe? They'll either move or, you know, like, they're not going to be affected by any of this. So, you know.
So yeah, it's just the idea, as our friend DJ Joe Nice says, the struggle is international.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you're here or there, when you're dealing with class, it's the same bullshit. So,
well, appreciate you coming, JP. Tell the people where they can find you. You know.
Well, you find me. I'm right here. But yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter at JBFont, as you guys can see there. But you can find me on RBN, Revolutionary Blackout Network. I also have my show on JB Show on Sundays at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can also find me on my channel at the same name, at JBFont, on YouTube. If you guys just take a look in there. And you guys can follow. I'm also on TikTok. They're trying to ban it. And you guys can find on basically anywhere where you guys just go at JB Font. Hell, you guys can find me on Venmo at JB Font. So thank you so much for you guys having me.
You're welcome. We got stuff lined up for you to do again. Over on we're gonna have to do it on Rockfin and Rumble. We want to do a whole Prince, go over like a Prince whole hour of just a Prince stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So that should be interesting.
Yeah.
You know, but also people should check out your show with Sabby when you do that. That's one of my favorite shows over there. I think it's just because I like the bricks. That pink brick is just very good, you know?
By the way, just to let you guys know, make sure to like this stream and subscribe to Indie News Network.
Yep. Do the dude. Just do it. Just do what JD tells you to do. But anyway, anything else? I think that's it. Hopefully people watched Robert Durden's stream with us yesterday. That should be fun. If not, go back, watch that. That was enjoyable. But anyway, love you guys. As always, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
Good night.
Good night.